It had been raining since before dawn, a steady, apologetic drizzle that turned the boulevard Richelieu-Lenoir into a belt of blurred lamps and wet umbrellas. Maigret stood at the kitchen window with his pipe cooling in his mouth, watching a woman in galoshes urge a terrier, along with all the patience of a parish nurse. The terrier refused, then went grudgingly. When the dog finally raised its nose, Maigret exhaled, the window clouded, and he thumbed the sill as if to wipe away more than the steam. Madame Maigret had a woolen shawl around her shoulders, though it was not cold. She had set the coffee to keep warm, and was trimming the crust from a baguette with the seriousness of a surgeon. She did not speak at once because she knew he preferred the quiet of rain and the first cup, and because there was nothing urgent to say. The house had the tidy hush of a place that knows precisely how long it takes to soften butter. "They've started painting again at the corner," she said finally, without looking up. "The smell gets into the stairwell." He tapped the bowl of his pipe against his palm and lifted the window a little. It stuck as usual. The building had settled over the years in a way no mason could account for. A file of water ran down the glass like a parade with no music. He was not due at the Quai des Orfèvres until 9, but he had already put on the heavy coat that made him look broader than he was. The coat smelled faintly of tobacco and old wool and the damp ghosts of cafes. He could have sat, but he remained standing to watch the street. The terrier and its nurse were gone. In their place was a delivery boy balancing a tray covered with oilcloth. Madame Maigret poured coffee. "Your lognon phoned yesterday afternoon. You were out, oh?" He accepted the cup. "What gloom does he bring this time?" "You'll see him today." He sounded as if he wanted to sound casual. He grunted. Inspector Lognon always sounded as if he were apologizing for the insufficiency of the world. If he had called and then not left a message, it meant he wanted to be overheard at the office, and not in Maigret's kitchen. That sort of caution belonged to Lognon, who was too careful even about being careful. On the chair, Maigret's hat lay upside down, its brim beaded with the moisture it had gathered last night on his walk home. He turned it over, dabbed it with a towel and placed it crown down. The small domestic movements, the towel, the hat, the cooling pipe, made a pattern he knew as surely as he knew the way the Seine smelled before a storm. It was not happiness exactly, but it was something more trustworthy. "I can make blanquette tonight if you come home early," Madame Maigret said. "If not, tomorrow." He smiled, the corner of his mouth turning in. "Let's say tomorrow. There may be—" "Something," she nodded. She had seen the same weather in him that he saw in the boulevard. She took a breath as if to speak, and then decided it wasn't worth it. She placed the trimmed baguette on a plate and slid it toward him. At 8:45 he buttoned his coat. The drizzle had gained the confidence of a rain. He kissed his wife on the temple. Her skin was warm from the stove. On the landing, the paint smell from the corner met him sharp as vinegar. He paused a moment beside the ficus that had lost most of its leaves and looked down the well of the stairs, as if the building itself might have something to confess. Outside, the rain was patient, a rain that would not be argued with. He walked without haste. The day would not begin sooner for any man's speed. There were bakeries already sold out of pastries, and clerks ducking under doorways when motorcars splashed too close to the curb. In the window of a haberdasher, a mannequin stared past him in a tie too bright for the weather. The city smelled faintly of yeast and bad cigarettes, of wool and petrol, and the acrid varnish of new paint. At the Quai des Orfèvres, the vestibule shone with the resigned cleanliness of an old woman's hands. He wiped his shoes on the mat, though there was no mud to speak of. The desk sergeant was making careful notes in a ledger, with a pencil that had been sharpened to a point so long it threatened to break. "Morning, Chief," the sergeant said without looking up. Maigret's office had a window that faced a courtyard, where a plane tree considered whether it would fail at leaves for another year. The radiator ticked. On the desk, someone had left a file with the corner folded to mark a place. He did not open it. He set his hat on the rack, shrugged out of the coat that held the rain close, and for a few seconds enjoyed the absence of weight. There were 2 messages. One in the spiky hand of the commissaire, who never signed, only underlined, and one typed by a clerk who had learned to spell Chief Inspector before she knew her own address. The typed note said, "Inspector Lognon requests a word. Personal matter." The underlined message, as was the commissaire's style, said everything and nothing. It contained a time, a place, and the expectation of results. But there was no hurry in it. He lit his pipe. The tobacco caught reluctantly, as if it too preferred to wait. A knock, a soft apologetic tapping that, like some clothing, belongs to only one man. Maigret did not call to come in. He looked at the door and it opened anyway, careful of the hinge. "Chief," Lognon said. He stood in the doorway like a wet umbrella asked to come inside. "Lognon." Maigret nodded toward the chair that always made a little sigh when someone sat in it. The inspector closed the door behind him and sat without settling, perching on the edge as if shame or rheumatism kept him from leaning back. "It's not really my district," Lognon began, "but things drift. Like the rain, you've taken to poetry." Lognon flinched, not catching the humor. "It's a boarding house, Chief, near the Canal Saint-Martin. An old place. L'Ancre d'Or. Do you know it? An inn?" Maigret teased the word as he tamped his pipe. "Only by its curtains. They're always closed, even on fine days." "Yes." Lognon's relief at being understood made him look briefly younger. "That's just it. They closed in June and haven't opened since, not properly. The patronne says draft. She says the wind makes a mess of the receipts. But someone's been airing rooms at hours when no one sees. The sheets on the line, only there on days when it rains hardest. Her husband's shoes are always dry, even when everyone else squelches. Perhaps he has an umbrella for his feet." Maigret's smoke drifted toward the window and died there against the glass. "Like someone without a passport. There was a lodger," Lognon said. "A commercial traveler, the sort who counts samples because his wife counts minutes. He hasn't been to collect his trunk. The patron says he left in a hurry for Lille, but there's a letter in the bureau addressed to him from a woman who calls herself Clairette, and the postmark is from 3 days ago. If he left, he didn't tell her. You've been in their bureau?" "I am a policeman," Lognon said, with the grave offense of a man who rarely gets to be exactly what he is. Silence went around the room once. The radiator settled into a new rhythm. "Why not your neighborhood?" Maigret asked. "They'll say it's domestic. The wife, the inn, a lodger who can't be bothered to write when there's a woman. They'll say it's the season for men to vanish. If there's a crime, it is irregular. Loose around the edges. It smells wrong." He paused. "And when I pass in the morning, Chief, the curtains are damp in patches as if someone washed only certain squares." Maigret watched the plane tree. Her leaf, the color of old brass, twitched in indecision. He nodded once, very slightly. "You could be looking for a drunk who found a better table," he said. "I could," Lognon agreed. "But the patron's hands were red and raw at the knuckles from washing, and she is the sort who wears gloves even in August." And the husband, Bardot. He calls himself. He's taken to hating birds. He throws pebbles at the pigeons. Yesterday, one of them flew in the open stair window. He shut the window as if it were a crime to have air. "Yes," Maigret said. He looked not at Lognon but at his own thumb, which carried a tiny burn from a match last night. "Some people are like that. What will you do, Chief?" "Nothing," Maigret said, and the word had the weight of something already begun. "I'll walk." Lognon swallowed an objection and stood. His hat was in his hands, turned brim up like a beggar's bowl. "If the commissaire asks—" "I went to look at some curtains." Lognon nodded miserably and left with his careful knock reversed. The door closed. The radiator ticked again, uncertain whether that counted as a new hour. Maigret put on his coat. He reached for the hat and paused. It was a gesture as habitual as breathing, a thing done with no thought at all, but he let the hat wait on the rack. He would walk bareheaded and let the rain have him. There are places one enters better without the armor of felt. On the landing he passed the coat-room girl, who tried to look busy with a stack of receipts. "Wet day," she said, as if apologizing for Paris. "They're all wet if you look long enough," he answered. Outside, the rain was no longer shy. It hung in the air like a quiet that won't be broken. He set off in the direction of the canal, pipe in pocket, hands sunk into the pockets of the heavy coat. He did not hurry because people who hurry make others tidy their lies. It wasn't the lodger, not yet. It wasn't even l'Ancre d'Or. It was the curtains and the husband's dry shoes and a woman who washed with gloves. The trouble announced itself the way a draft does in an old room. Nothing moving, yet something always moved. Something always moved. On the boulevard, the lights showed in the puddles like coins that would buy nothing. A bus splashed past and went on. Maigret, who had never trusted buses, took the sidewalks that knew his weight. He would have a glass of something hot at the first cafe that didn't force a smile, and then he would stand across from the inn where the curtains were always closed and watch until the rain told the truth. The rain did not change its mind, and neither did he. He took the canal as one takes a familiar scar, not looking at it and yet aware of its pull. The water was the color of weak tea. Across the street, a narrow house sulked between a grocer and a locksmith. Tired gold letters, L'Ancre d'Or. The curtains, brown and thick, drank the light. He crossed without haste, bareheaded, the damp like a quiet reproach. The awning was not extended. Where a bell had been, 2 screw holes remained, like eyes that had once seen. He pushed into the smell of boiled coffee and something sharper. Soap used recently and quickly, as if the room had needed to forget. 2 workmen hunched near the window, speaking in the low monotone of men who conserve warmth. Behind the zinc counter, the patronne wore a grey cardigan with a pearl button missing at the throat. Her hands were what Lognon had promised, reddened knuckles, a wedding ring turned inward. "You'll be wanting something hot," she said without welcome. "A small Calvados," Maigret answered. "And a coffee if it's not inconvenient." Nothing is inconvenient if one pays, yet she poured the coffee first, though the bottle stood open. She watched the level rise as if it might trick her. He took a seat near the heater, which ticked without conviction. An oilcloth apron hung on a peg, beaded with new water. The floor beneath was dry. The Calvados was clean and unresentful. He let it rest before swallowing. The workmen watched the street, collars up, their trousers glazed with honest mud. He thought of Bardot's shoes, so dry they were almost impolite, and let the thought go by like a fish permitted to grow. The patronne brought the coffee, not quite full. Her eyes touched his coat, his hands, the absence of a hat. "You're a stranger," she said. "I'm always a stranger at first." He warmed his fingers on the cup. "You keep it warm here. It's a house. People sleep." She wiped a clean patch on the counter that hadn't needed wiping. "Do they sleep well?" "As well as people do in Paris." She looked toward the window. "Rain is bad for business. Men drink less when the sky does the pouring." Somewhere above, a board creaked and then remembered itself. On the wall, a clock's minute hand had stopped 2 marks short. Beyond the half-open door, he saw a corridor table with its varnish gone. On it lay a letter, its corner weighted by a spoon. He did not lean. The address showed only a blue a beginning looking for courage. The husband came at last, as if conjured by being thought of. Small and compact, he moved like a man who prefers corners. His hair had obeyed the comb. His shoes, indeed, were dry enough to be insolent. He nodded to his wife and to Maigret without seeing either. "Bardot," the wife said. Not a name, more a warning. He took up a newspaper, found nothing, put it down. "The plumber says Thursday," he announced. "There is no leak," she answered too quickly. "No," he said after a pause. "There is no leak." Maigret finished his cup, left a coin too many. The patron looked at it as at a trick. "Keep it," he said. "For the bell you no longer have." For a moment her eyes were naked. "We don't like noise," she said. Outside, the rain had settled into certainty. 2 doors down, the tobacconist kept his blinds half lowered. The man had a face like folded parchment. Maigret asked for gitanes, though his pipe sat heavy in his pocket. The ritual of buying cigarettes often loosens other rituals. "You don't usually take paper chimneys," the tobacconist said. "Memory more exact than his scales. They're for a friend." He let the first question wait until the change had been counted. "The inn. Quiet place. Quieter lately." The shopkeeper tapped ash from an imaginary cigarette. "People come and go, that's the business. But the last one didn't go the right way." "Meaning?" "A bag waiting where an arm should be. A trunk that sits as if it had patience. And the lady with the gloves carries wash like a priestess." "In this rain? One lets the sheets drink, no?" "There was a lodger," Maigret said, as if remembering. "Commercial traveller. They travel," the man said, "but the women's letters do not. I keep a key for the postman when he is late. I have seen the envelopes. One name. Same hand. Clairette." The name felt both theatrical and true. The eyebrows twitched but did not rise. "You are a friend of friends, only of rain." Maigret pocketed the cigarettes, regretting the lie. "If the bag is still waiting, the story isn't finished." "The story," the tobacconist said dryly, "is rarely finished on this street." Back at L'Ancre d'Or he stood as men stand when deciding whether to step into a photograph. An upstairs curtain moved a finger's width and stopped. A delivery boy arrived with a crate of mineral water. and left it in the vestibule without entering. Moments later, Bardot looked up the street and down, and dragged the crate inside with a speed that did not suit his deliberate shoes. The oilcloth apron vanished from its peg. He turned the corner into the alley behind the row. The walls sweated and the downpipes complained. On the back step, a clean square showed where a pail had stood and been removed too soon. Under a lean-to, 3 pillowcases steamed, though the rain would never allow them to dry. He did not knock. He watched water gather along the gutter and carry itself away. Patience at his age was a habit like breathing. He made a circuit, alley to street, street to canal, canal to the inn again, until a bakery clock struck 11:15. Then he returned to the quay without haste. In his chair the pipe consented to fire. He wrote nothing. The timid knock finally came. Yes, Lognon entered, hat held as if it might fly. Well? He asked, eager to be discouraged. They keep clean at odd hours, Maigret said. Their bell is down. The husband buys mineral water when rain is loudest. The tobacconist counts letters from a claret. There's a trunk that pretends not to remember its owner. He paused. Tonight we won't go in. We'll wait. People open curtains when they think the dark is on their side. Lognon looked relieved and miserable together. I will bring Patience, he said. Bring a scarf, Maigret answered. Patience you already have. The rain kept its promise into evening. By 6 the light had thinned to a grey Patience that made the canal look older. Maigret ate boiled beef in a workman's café 2 doors from l'Ancre d'Or, because food steadies a man more discreetly than liquor. Lognon appeared, brought his gloom with the damp. Hans sat without speaking until the waitress left a carafe and 2 glasses. You were right about the scarf, he said. You can always remove what you have, Maigret answered. Pouring. Through the window, the inn's brown curtains held their ground. At 7, a delivery of coal arrived behind the row. The porter had a limp that made the sacks sway as if reluctant. Bardot emerged from the back door wearing a cap too new for his coat and guided the man as if the cellar were an intimate. Twice he looked up the alley, not expecting anyone and yet expecting. His shoes remained implausibly dry. The sacks went down a chute with the soft thunder of black rain. Coal on a night you could borrow cold, Lognon murmured. Or giving weight to a room, Maigret said. They paid and stepped back into the drizzle. Across from the inn, a shuttered shop with a recessed doorway offered shelter. Inside, the café closed its door to walk-ins at 8, though a lamp stayed on for whoever lived above. The patron crossed and recrossed the room, wiping surfaces that had already surrendered. Bardot counted coins, stacked them, and flattened the piles with his palm. When the last workman left, the patron turned the key and blew out 1 lamp. Someone is on the stairs, Lognon said. Someone always is, Maigret said without moving. A small figure came down carrying a pot with both hands. A woman, perhaps 25, perhaps a careful 30, wearing a dress altered by a friend. She set the pot on the zinc. The patron fetched a ladle. The woman did not drink, only warmed her fingers, and glanced toward the staircase with the unease of someone borrowing what is not hers. That one belongs to the 2nd floor back, Maigret said. The woman left with the pot wrapped in a towel. Her shoes were wet enough to squeak. Her hem wore the day like an apology. Bardot watched her go as a shopkeeper watches a client who pays correctly and yet worries him. A man in a peacoat knocked twice, then again after counting to 10. Bardot opened with his mouth already armed for refusal. The exchange was brief. Coins changed hands. The man left with an expression that said he had obtained less than he had come for. Debt makes men knock in 3s, Lognon said. Comfort makes them knock once, Maigret returned. At 9:30, the upstairs window at the back showed a faint moving light, and then another, as if 2 people carried small islands of fire through a dark sea. A shadow crossed the curtain, broad in the shoulders, head forward, the posture of a man accustomed to stairs. It paused. The curtain, which had pretended all day not to know about air, bellied and fell flat again. Go home, Maigret said without looking at Lognon. Sleep or don't. Come at 9 tomorrow with clean paper. Don't speak to anyone who wears an apron. You'll remain? I'll let the inn teach me its habits. When the inspector had gone, the night welcomed Maigret as a familiar inconvenience. He changed doorways twice, not to disguise himself but to allow the street to see him from other angles. Toward one, something altered. Not the rain, which refused drama, but the tempo of the house. A bolt drawn somewhere, A door that had always closed quietly, now swollen by damp. Bardot appeared long enough to hook a chain across the cafe door and stand listening. Voices above, a woman's, then silence, then the tired cough of a man who has not caught a cold but a habit. Maigret crossed the street and stood openly before the door. He could see along the corridor to the little table with the spoon that had held the corner of a letter. It was not there. The spoon remained. On a peg hung the oilcloth apron, askew, dripping from fresh use. The air smelt of soap and something iron that had wanted to be hidden and was not quick enough. He lifted the latch of the chain with a finger. It rang the smallest note of metal on metal. Bardot came from the rear at once, wiping his hands on nothing. "We're closed," he said, with the courtesy of a man declaring a border. "I can smell your work," Maigret said mildly. "It's too late to argue that water sleeps. We clean at night. It's quieter." They considered each other through the narrow of the chain. The patron's footsteps approached and stopped short of sight. "Good night," Bardot said, and shut the door carefully, then rehooked the chain with exaggerated gentleness. Maigret walked away because going is another way of staying. At the corner, he lit his pipe and let it go out while thinking. Back at the quay, the corridors smelled of their own sleep. He wrote a single line on a sheet and left it under his blotter, not as a record but as a question he wished to find again in the morning. He slept badly and rose early. By 8 he was back on the boulevard, hat this time, because a hat makes lies behave. The patronne had opened the door to air what she could not acknowledge. On the zinc were 3 saucers, each cupping a ring of coffee like an eclipse. No one had sat to drink them. A trunk had been shifted in the corridor. The skirting board wore a fresh bruise. The woman from the second floor back descended with her pot and blinked at him as if he were a draught. She hesitated, then said, "Monsieur?" "Only that," and clutched the pot a fraction closer. "Good morning," he said. "I keep early hours." "When one borrows hot water," she said, "one returns it before others need it. It is polite." "Polite people do not always sleep well," he observed. She looked as if surprised to be seen. "Nor do those who clean," she said, and colored slightly. He stepped aside so she could pass. On the floor by the trunk, a tiny flake of something had dried in the night into a pale petal shape. Soap, perhaps, or salt. He did not stoop. He did not need to. Now. He went in as men step into an empty church, hat in hand, eyes learning the quiet. The patron recognized him and set a cloth on a place already clean. "You open early," he said. "People have trains. People have lives." She slid a cup under the machine. "If you want coffee, there is coffee." "I'll take it," he said. The coffee was strong. He watched the cuffs of her cardigan, dark with damp, and the bucket between counter and stairs where water had turned grey. The oilcloth apron hung straight. Bardot came from the corridor with a ledger. "We'll need the plumber," he announced. "The pipes behave if you leave them be," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "They behave." He set the ledger on the zinc. Names and dates marched until a gap. Around the blank the ink had spread, as if a wet cloth had tried to persuade the day to forget. Maigret did not touch it. "Quiet house," he said. "It was quieter," Bardot answered, then corrected. "Phones, radios. You take messages?" Maigret asked. "We are not a post office," the patron said quickly. "We are an inn." "Someone left a letter yesterday," he said. "For a monsieur with a woman's hand, Clairette." A blink gone. Bardot recovered. "Clients receive what is brought," he said. "Of course," Maigret said, and carried his cup into the corridor because a man with coffee is forgiven for being where coffee goes. The trunk leaned where the skirting wore a fresh bruise. The straps had been rubbed with something like candle. The tag had been peeled to bone. Beside it, a cheap valise mended with wire. Above, a door opened a slit. The young woman from the second back looked down and vanished. He left coins and the rest of his coffee. At the door, he said, "If Clairette comes, give her my regards," naming the tobacconist. "He keeps letters safe." Outside, the rain was a fine net. Lorient arrived at 9:03 with clean paper. "We will not write," Maigret said. "We will walk to the quay and return past the canal." On the way, he told him what the morning had offered. A blank line, damp cuffs, a trunk without a name. "They cannot endure noise," he said. "Water is their witness." At the quay, the commissaire's laugh sounded like policy. They escaped before it asked for explanations. "Do we search?" Lorient asked. "We wait to be invited," Maigret said. "People in trouble send invitations and call them mistakes." By 11 they were back. The tobacconist lifted his blind a finger's width and nodded. "Letters?" Maigret asked. "One," the man said, "for the traveller who doesn't travel. Same hand." He set the envelope on the glass. It smelled faintly of scent fought by soap. "Monsieur Armand Boulin," the address read. The postmark 2 days old. On the back, in pencil, "If gone, forward to 14 Rue d'Hauteville, 3rd floor left." "Kind," Maigret murmured. They left the letter and took a bus. Rue d'Hauteville smelled of wet chalk. Letter boxes, Si le Maire Couture. Veuve Poirier. Fresh paint with a hesitant hand. Cedar Claret. They did not ring. Opposite, a cafe's steam rose. They watched the door. At noon, a woman in a raincoat too thin came out and turned left empty-handed. "Don't follow," Maigret said. "She will return." She did 10 minutes later with a parcel the size of 2 soaps. She saw nothing of them and went up. "Now," Maigret said, "3rd floor left, a door with a clean rub of cloth near the latch." He knocked the way neighbours knock. A chain held the opening. The young woman from the inn stair looked out. "Yes? Claret?" he asked, using the name from the envelope. "There is no madam," she said. "Only Claret. Then you are who I came for. I am Maigret." She shut the door, unhooked the chain, opened and let them in. The room was careful. A sewing machine near the window guarded a scrap of blue. "You are alone," he said, "since a week." Monsieur Boulin had business. "He travels. He told me to write to the inn because sometimes he is there and sometimes between." "How did you meet?" Lognon asked. "At the inn," she said, looking at the floor and then at Maigret. "He sells linings and buttons. He ate there because his cart was near. He is particular. He likes things dry." "His shoes," Maigret said. "What did he tell you last?" "That he would return for his trunk." "He said Thursday. He did not come. I wrote because he does not like—" She searched, surprises. "And you?" "No," she said. "I like to know where my sentences end." "You wrote again," he said. "You put this address on the back." "I did." She sat. "You came because of my letters." "I came because of curtains," he said. "Your letters are part of their folds." "He is a good man," she said. "He counts his samples. He pays. He does not drink except when rain beats the zinc. When he did not come, did you go to the inn?" "I did." She said he left Wednesday night, said not to worry. But her mouth didn't know how. "I asked for his trunk. They said it had been sent to me. Then they asked my address. I did not give it." "The trunk is at the inn," Maigret said gently. "It has nowhere else to be." Her hand went to her throat. "Then where is he? Then where is he?" He looked toward the sewing machine. On the chair lay a scrap of rough brown cloth with tiny blue anchors. "They're tablecloths," Claret said. "I mend for them." "You were there the day before yesterday," he said. "I'm there most days," she admitted. 4 to 6. "Today as well," he said. "Ask for coffee. Say you have heard nothing, you are foolish, you are worried. Watch their eyes when you mention the trunk." She nodded. "And you?" "I will be where rain finishes being water," he said. "Not far." On the landing, Lognon muttered, "You will use her." "She will use herself," Maigret said, descending. Outside, the rain was a mist. They walked toward the canal. 4 o'clock, Maigret said. "Until then, we let the inn persuade itself that trunks can travel on thoughts. At 4, thoughts will have to carry weight." He did not add what he was sure of. Weight leaves marks even on obedient floors. He had seen the bruise on the skirting. Before night, he expected to see where the rest had scraped. At 3:30, the canal held the afternoon. Maigret and Lognon took the far pavement, so the inn would sit a little distant, as if they were remembering, not watching. The gutter above them leaked steadily. 4, Maigret said. Claret came early, coat buttoned to the throat, hat pinned. She did not notice them. The honest do not look for what is not called. She entered with a lift of the chin. The door took her, and the rain again. "Count," Maigret said. Lognon counted in silence. Had 500 and something, the latch clicked. Claret reappeared with a brown paper parcel. She paused, looked left, right, then down, and turned toward the canal. He met her where a cart had left a shallow lake. She recognized him and tried to smile. "They send you with consolation?" he asked. "His waistcoat," she said, holding it carefully. "For mending." "Madame says hands should be busy when minds will not." "And the trunk?" "They say he collected it himself," she answered too quickly, and the word itself flushed. "It was sudden, so there is no receipt." "You told them Thursday?" "I did. He liked Thursdays. The clerks were kinder." She looked back at the door. They agreed too fast. They walked to the canal rail where moss made the iron soft. "What else?" he said. Madame was calm like a bucket with a crack. Water in, water out. Monsieur Bardot kept going to the back and returning, as if testing which boards would remember him. When I said trunk, he smoothed the zinc with his palm like ironing. There was a cough upstairs. Not ill, held breath, he nodded. At home you will unpick the seams with kindness. If anything was hidden there by a man in a hurry, keep it for me. No heroics. I am not brave, she said. That is the proper kind. He left her to the damp and the coal smell that ignores rain. Back under the gutter, he watched the patron lift the trap behind the counter, look down long and close it with care. Bardot came from the rear wearing his 2 new cap, remembered it and took it off. The oilcloth apron was gone from its peg. Somewhere a tap ran without anyone listening. You were right, Lognon murmured. They bleed water. Water likes to be counted, Maigret said. Let us oblige it. At 4:20, a boy with a toolbox knocked twice with instructed knuckles. Plumber, Maigret said and crossed as if for a stroll. Bardot opened at once, relief mislaid on his face. Down, he told the boy, chin toward the trap. He noticed Maigret and arranged a welcome that did not fit. Monsieur, we are busy. When pipes are ill, one visits, Maigret said mildly. Plumbing talks. The boy slipped past the zinc. The patron's hands were clean to the knuckles now, the redness paler. May I look? Maigret asked. And because refusal would have made a noise, Bardot stood aside. The cellar steps had the shine of many apologies. Cole breathed. The boy listened to a pipe politely, tapping, turning. Backed up, he said. Too much use after too much nothing. Bardot hovered. Maigret let his eyes make their slow circle. Along the far wall, behind sacks of coal, the crusted line of water had risen recently and dried uneven. A tide mark interrupted where something large had stood. On the packed earth, 2 parallel bruises scuffed arcs toward the chute and stopped a foot short, as if a weight had thought better of it. He did not step closer. The trap? He asked. Rats are democratic. We keep it shut, Bardot said. Yet the smell comes, Maigret said. Life fights, but only so much. Above, a cup clattered. The boy loosened a collar. A brown thread of water chose his cuff. It will clear, he said. But you'll want me twice this week. Things have settled wrong. Things often do, Maigret climbed first. Arriving first lets one see what arrival does to a room. The patron had placed 2 saucers on the zinc and then removed one. He took the remaining place. Bardot came up trying to seem occupied and achieved breathless. Coffee, Maigret said, and a bottle of mineral water. She brought them. The water tasted correct in its city way. On the bottle a bead travelled and hesitated. The label's glue, softened by damp, surrendered a corner. Your plumber is quick, he said. We do not like trouble, Bardot answered. Nor I. He set the bottle down. The freed paper touched his thumb. Under it, between glue and glass, a short thread had been trapped, brown with a tiny blue anchor printed precise and domestic. The pattern matched the scrap on Clairette's chair. He did not lift it. He drank, set a coin on the saucer with the movement of a man already thinking of his umbrella. When did Monsieur Boulin collect his trunk? He asked idly. Thursday, Bardot said, then correcting himself too late. Friday morning, which was it? Friday, he settled, and he left a forwarding address? He said he would write. From Lille, the patron added, giving the lie a stick. Maigret nodded and left. The rain had thinned to powder. They walked without talking. Well? Lognon asked. The cellar keeps its tongue, Maigret said. But the bottle spoke. Tonight they will try to finish what they began. When people think they have crossed a border, they empty their pockets of caution. And we will be the border. Fetch Janvier and a man who can sit in the dark without coughing. No uniforms. If anyone asks, I have gone home. At 9 the canal looked older. He returned to the recessed doorway opposite the inn. Janvier arrived with a plain hat. The other man, Picard, breathed like a cat. No heroics, Maigret said. If they carry weight, we count steps, not hearts. If they go to the cellar, we listen to how the air changes. They took their places the way rain takes a roof edge. Lamps came on behind the brown curtains. The street emptied of errands and filled with people going nowhere. Inside, the patron moved slowly. Bardot crossed and recrossed, a man rehearsing departure and forgetting his lines. At 10:30, the trap lifted. A smell surfaced. Not strong, merely decisive. Bardot disappeared with a coil of rope that had learned knots. The patron stood at the edge of the opening and did not look down at all. "Now," Maigret said, almost gently, "let them think the dark is on their side." They waited until the street forgot it had watchers. The canal cleared its throat, and the inn settled into a quiet that believed itself alone. Bardot rose from the trap, listened, then vanished again. The patronne stood by the opening with her hands on the zinc. When the hush had convinced itself, Maigret left the doorway and crossed. He touched the chain with a knuckle. Its faint note answered. The patronne started and made her face into something clean. "Closed?" she said. "Of course." He looked past her to the square of darker dark that led down. "I came for a bottle of mineral water, the one with anchors on the label." "Tomorrow," she said. "We are out." From below came a scrape, then the whisper of rope through a ring. "I've brought friends who dislike stairs," he said. Janvier's hand freed the chain. Picard followed. "You've no right," the patron told the room. "Probably," Maigret answered, and removed his hat because the cellar had the seriousness of a church. He went down without asking for light. A pocket lamp is kinder. The smell met them. Not iron, not panic, only suds, coal, wet cloth. A place overwashed in the hope that water could rinse a mistake away. Take away. His circle found Bardot bent over a tarpaulin, laid like a poor tablecloth on the earth. He froze, not in guilt first, but in calculation, a man weighing whether to finish a thing or pretend it was finished. "Don't trouble yourself," Maigret said, near gentle. "We'll look together." A rope was tied to an iron ring through the tarpaulin. The knot was competent. An open bottle of lye shone at the mouth. Along the wall, the damp's tide line broke where some recent absence had stood. Beside it, a square of earth lay dry, 4 small dimples pressed in as if feet had braced, pulling. "Help me," Maigret said to Bardot, as if asking a favor. They lifted an edge. The tarpaulin exhaled the sleep of shut things. Beneath lay the traveler's trunk, soaked and racked, prized and nailed back badly. Inside, a jam of torn ticking and cloth, sodden as if weather had visited. A single slipper showed, not a foot, but the memory of one. Maigret set it aside like a photograph. "It was an accident," Bardot said. The words had waited 3 nights. He fell on the stairs. He broke himself. "We are poor people." "Yes," Maigret said. "Poor people often break themselves." Janvier lifted a corner of ticking. Between layers, something had been poured, lye perhaps, to persuade a nose to doubt. The cellar offered what it could. Weight moved. "Time passed badly here. Where?" Maigret asked, not demanding. "Where is the rest?" Bardot's eyes flicked to the chute and away. "Not the water," he said too quickly. "I am not a criminal." "No," Maigret said. "You are an innkeeper." He turned the lamp toward the coal and away. "Your wife?" She lifted the trap. "She knows nothing. She knows the weight of the rope," he said, "and how many steps are in the dark." A drip marked its minute. The patron came to the top stair without pretending surprise, hands together low as if counting something that could still be saved. "I told him," she said into the dark. "Everything becomes heavy if you keep it too long." "He scolded the damp," Bardot said. "He came in a slipper and said, 'You take money for this.'" He put his hand on the banister. "The wood gave—" "He—" Fingers tapped the air. The sentence fell. "That was 3 nights ago," Maigret said. "At first we waited for morning," Bardot said. Then morning came and did not decide. The trunk seemed large enough if one did not look. But the trunk kept nothing. The rain said it would eat secrets if we fed them slowly. Then he had a woman who writes letters. "Yes," Maigret said. "The river forgets letters." "He fell," he added softly. "And you are poor." "The police would take the license," the patron said. "We have only this." "You should have called," he said without venom. "It is always worse later." He straightened. Janvier telephoned quietly, asked them to come as if to a friend's supper. "Picard, stay with Madame." He looked at Bardot. "You will sit. Do not tidy. People always want to tidy." Bardot sat on the bottom step where men put parcels while tying a scarf. His name was Boulin, the patron said down into the cellar, as if naming might keep part of him clean. He ate soup like a child. He said please to a broom. "I did not want him to be—" Her hand made a circle above the tarpaulin. "But the stair doesn't ask." "The stair never asks," Maigret said. He pocketed the lamp and let the dark belong to the cellar again. "Where is the other part?" Bardot looked as if he might lie, then understood that lies are useful only while one is still arranging furniture. "We carried him to the washroom," he said. "I thought—" His swallow sounded dry in a wet place. "I thought water would make him less." "Water makes everything more," Maigret said. Above, careful shoes crossed the floor. The house shifted in its sleep. Maigret climbed halfway toward the trap and paused. The kitchen would be as he had seen it. A pot still warm, a cloth wrung too hard, cups not yet finished on saucers. A bottle with an anchor on the label waiting without meaning to. He did not yet think of handcuffs. He thought of Clairette with the waistcoat folded on her knees, unpicking a seam to see what a careful man had tucked there. He thought of the river that forgets nothing it keeps, and of rain telling people they are alone when they are less alone than they fear. "Madame," he said into the dark, "tomorrow you will sleep. Tonight you will sit. Do not make coffee. Do not wash." He looked at Bardot. "You will not talk yourselves into better versions. Tell the small truth you have." Bardot nodded. The rope lay like a question no one answered. The first car came without siren, courteous as a doctor refusing to wake a child. The tobacconist's lamp across the street flickered and held. The rain went on being rain. Maigret, halfway between earth and floor, listened to the house breathe and understood that what remained was not to catch anyone, but to let what had already been caught learn it could stop struggling. He drew in the damp air, patient as ever. The men from the lab moved like people in a library. Janvier spoke quietly to them at the door, then sent one to the cellar and another to the narrow washroom that smelled of soap and denial. Bardot remained on the bottom step, obedient to gravity. Maigret did not touch anything. He stood in the corridor where the skirting had a bruise and let the house tell its story without words. The zinc, wiped to exhaustion, kept a ring where a bottle had rested too long. A thread of brown with its toy anchor still clung beneath the peeling label. The commissaire arrived, hat square, eyebrows making policy. "So?" he asked. "So a man fell," Maigret said. "And then fear miscounted what to do with him. We will need a statement. You will have one." "Not now." He glanced toward the table. The patron's hands lay quiet. Bardot did not lift his eyes. When it was possible to speak without making the room defensive, Maigret pulled a chair for Bardot and another for himself, not opposite but a little to the side. "Where men agree over dominoes. What was the first thing you did after he fell?" he asked. "Listened," Bardot said. "For guests." "For the door." "For my license." He stared at his hands. "She, my wife, said, 'Put him on the bed.' The stairs make liars of us. He was heavy. The trousers were damp from the step." "He had quarreled with you." "He had disapproved," Bardot corrected. "He said the curtains were a threat to air." He laughed at the mineral water. He said poor people make their own traps. He tapped the banister. I told him it could hold a horse. It held neither. The patron made a small sound, not protest, not agreement. "He was a handsome complainer," she said, almost tender. "At the end I would have told him he wore his hat wrong if it would have kept him alive." "We waited for morning," Bardot went on. "In the dark one believes in invisibility. In the light one believes in neighbors. Between we believed in neither. I had the thought we could put him in the trunk and send it to the station. But the trunk lied about its size. It held pieces of promises and nothing whole. Then I fetched the lie. I thought water would make him less." "Water makes everything more," Maigret said. He stood as if after a long train ride. "We will take him away. All of him. Tonight you will sleep at the station. Will we lose the inn?" the patron asked. "Likely," he said. "Or keep it under a name you won't like." "We are not bad people," Bardot told the floor. "No," Maigret said. "You polish stairs and believe in mineral water." He picked up his hat. "I'm going to Clairette." The tobacconist had left his blind a finger higher. "It will be in the evening papers," he said. "Not today." Maigret climbed to the third floor. Clairette opened on the chain and then let him in at once. The room had changed by one small thing. The waistcoat lay on the table, turned like a confession. A shallow saucer held 3 buttons saved from the lining. He had 10 francs stitched behind the facing, she said, for taxis in towns where he did not know the language. There was a laundry ticket from Malakoff and a pawn stub without address. "Hand this." She held out a folded paper, a receipt from the inn. He paid for a week and came for 4 days. Maigret read the careful figures, the date 2 days before the fall, the patron's signature made like someone who learned to write late. "He was leaving," he said. He meant to fetch his trunk, she answered. He told me not to overcook the veal on Thursday. He always told food what to do when he was nervous. He corrected people, Maigret said. He corrected the world, she said. And then, with a small shrug that discovered her age, he wanted it to be the size of his suitcase. That is a kind of love. It is also a kind of trouble. He fell, Maigret said gently, on the stairs. It was nobody's intention. Her shoulders rose and settled, and the breath found a place to go. I thought so. He disliked stair polish. He would make a speech about it to a duchess. You will come to the quay to make a statement, he said. Not now. Will I see him? Tomorrow, if you still wish. She looked toward the scrap of blue cloth by the machine. I will mend the waistcoat. If a thing is left hanging, the day doesn't end. You were good for him, Maigret said, rising. Was I? She smiled without knowing. He liked to know where the salt was. I kept it in the same place. On the stairs, the banister had been wiped, as if the building feared to be accused. Maigret slid his palm along it, and felt the faint drag of new polish. Back at the inn, the cars had gone. A single uniformed man sat on a stool, and looked out as if at rain on holiday. The patron and Bardot had been taken away. Janvier waited with 2 cups. Coffee? He asked. If it exists. The burnt liquid did what it could. We'll see the river tomorrow, Maigret added. For him? Janvier said. For the idea of him. The rest is accounted for. Lognon arrived late. The commissaire wants the word dismemberment to appear exactly once, he reported. He can keep his words, Maigret said. We will use ours. He looked at the curtains, still closed, and at the reflection of the street lamp within them. Find a carpenter. The banister must be truer than it is. To prevent the next accident, Lognon said. To prevent the next fear, Maigret corrected. Accidents we cannot fix. Fear we can sometimes outwait. He stayed until the inn remembered that time moves even when people cannot. When he finally stepped back into the night, the rain had thinned to a breath. He felt old in the honest way, of a man who has watched small miscalculations become a single heavy thing and knows the weight, once measured, is never what one expects. The canal kept its face. Paris went on putting out and drawing in its lights like a city breathing. He matched his step to it and walked home without hurry, pipe unlit, listening as the rain softened the stones and did not ask for answers. Morning came without enthusiasm. The clouds hung like dishcloths wrung but not folded, and the city's stones looked honest under a flat light. Maigret reached the quay early. The radiator worked. On his desk lay the commissaire's rectangle of impatience. Statements by noon, press by evening. Avoid tragic adjectives. He slid it under the blotter as one tucks a child in. Coffee in the corridor tasted of pipes and tin. Janvier arrived with his coat over his arm, and an expression that could carry 2 messages without spilling either. Bardot and the wife agree in what they remember, he said. They diverge only in what they wish had happened. They will quarrel in their dreams, Maigret said. Clairette? She telephoned. She will come at 11. They walked to the river because some news should be told near moving water. Barges nudged one another. The river reminded Paris that forgetting is not the same as forgiving. They were afraid of everything, Janvier said. Inspectors, neighbors, the word report. And of the dark when it behaves like a witness, Maigret said. Once you begin whispering, the whisper expects company. License records show a lapse last year, Janvier added. Renewed late with a warning for crowding the attic rooms. Crowding, Maigret repeated. Boulin disliked crowded things. At 11, Clairette arrived looking smaller because the day was sober. She wore the same coat. The waistcoat lay folded within paper, folded twice more. In the viewing room, the lamp promised nothing. She did not faint. She leaned her cheek a moment against the cold and said something that might have been his name. When she stepped back, she smoothed her hair as if finishing a task. He always wore a saint's medal, she said. Cheap tin. He touched it before stairs. He said it could not hurt. It isn't with him, Maigret answered. No. She looked, not accusingly, merely to complete a list. I will mend the waistcoat and take it to his sister in Chartres. She is practical. She will understand the sewing better than the story. Did you love him? Maigret asked. In the way you love a window that sometimes sticks, she said. You learn when to push. He walked her to the bus, then took Janvier toward Malakoff. The laundry sat behind a greengrocer, who watered cabbages as if they were punishments. Inside, steam pretended to be virtue. A woman with a scarf like a verdict recognized the ticket at once. "Ah, the salesman who scolded starch," she said. "He came Monday. Asked for Thursday. We asked for Friday. He paid in advance. He did not collect. What did he leave? 2 shirts, drawers, a collar that had opinions. I sewed a button. They left with the parcel under Janvier's arm. On the way back, they stopped at a shop where stair polish is sold in tins that pretend to be leaves. The proprietor remembered Bardot. He bought a tin last week, the man said. Wanted wood to behave like a priest. I told him it would make it slippery if he didn't listen. People rarely listen to Polish, Maigret said. At the quay, the commissaire aligned pens and asked for nouns. Maigret gave him accident, delay, fear, and responsibility. He sent Janvier to the inn with the shirts for Clairette to fetch later and walked to the tobacconist. "You were kind yesterday," he told the man. "I expect nothing," the tobacconist replied. "There will be headlines?" "Modest ones," Maigret said. In the afternoon he let the minutes clear and then went to see Bardot and his wife. They sat together but not touching, as if touch would obligate them to choose a single fear. He did not open with questions. He opened the parcel. He paid in advance, he said. The patronne put her palms upon the bundle as if it might be warm. "He was particular," she said. "You will have a magistrate," Maigret told them. "He will not be unkind. The law dislikes lies, but it understands stairs and night." Bardot nodded. He had shaved badly. "There is something small," he said. "The medal. It came off when we moved him. I put it in the drawer with bottle openers. I thought a priest would want it. Then I forgot. It will help no one and hurt no one," Maigret said. "Bring it anyway." "It has a dent," the patron murmured, near the saint's shoulder. From a counter. He tapped it when pleased with a price. "You saw that." "I saw many things," she answered. "This morning I tied my apron the way he preferred, and then I changed it back. It felt like washing a cup twice." "You will rest," he said. "Rest is honest work." When he left them, the light had chosen evening. He walked to the canal because the day wanted a place to sit, and there a bus sighed to a stop, and Clairette stepped down, carrying a small bouquet wrapped in newspaper. "Flowers felt silly," she said. "So I brought parsley. His sister will use it. Parsley is practical. And the shirts. At the inn for you when it is proper." She stood with him at the rail. "I thought of the curtains," she said, almost apologizing. He said they were a threat to air. Perhaps he liked them a little. He always liked things he could disapprove of. "That is a common affection," Maigret said. "We keep near what permits us to scold." "I will go to Chartres by the local," she said. "It stops at every field." He would tell the conductor how to blow the whistle. "I will sit and say nothing." He watched her walk away herself. The river went on. He turned toward the quay, where paperwork waited like rain to be counted. At his desk he wrote to the commissaire that the inn would need a carpenter and perhaps a priest who knew how to sit with those who had frightened themselves. He suggested suspending the license without destroying it. The radiator ticked. Night had not yet decided for rain. He passed l'Ancre d'Or. The curtains were drawn, but one edge had been caught behind a chair, and a blade of light showed where it had not shown before. He did not ring. He stood until the slice widened and narrowed again. Inside, someone moved from one habit to another, learning the ones that did not require lying. He went home without hurry, pipe unlit, thinking of a medal with a dent near the saint's shoulder, and of a stair that had asked no questions. Night chose a compromise and left the streets with a glaze. At home the ficus dropped another leaf. Madame Maigret removed a casserole from the oven, sleeves rolled exactly twice. "You're late," she said, without blame. "I kept it warm." He sat, and the room behaved the way a good room does when it knows its people. He told her the story as one tells the weather of a journey, fact by fact. She listened, poured wine, and made the little hum that meant she had been adding silently. "Mineral water," she said. "It leaves rings." He looked at her. "In the kitchen," she went on. "If one hides something under a bottle, the wet admits it. You see the circle later where the label softens." She tapped the table. "Housewives know, He smiled. "And the curtains?" she added. "Sometimes people close them because they are ashamed of the wallpaper." He thought of the inn's paper, flowers gone grey. "Perhaps," he said. "Or because the light tells stories, they ate." He slept like someone who trusts his ceiling. In the morning, the sky had decided for a brittle honesty. At the quay, a carpenter with a pencil behind his ear waited with a municipal form to be signed. "We will reinforce and remove the shine," the man said. "Stair should tell feet the truth. Tell feet the truth." "Do that," Maigret said. "Send the bill to the people who rent licenses, not to the house that carries them." The magistrate took statements with a pen that had seen better days. Bardot's confession read like something polished and set aside. The patron's like soap that had forgotten what it fought. The word accident stood finally without adjectives. At midday he walked to the market on Rue de Bretagne. He bought apples he did not need and watched people make the small bargains by which a city stays gentle. Near the fishmonger he met the woman from the second back, the one who borrowed hot water. "You have been busy," she said. "It is my shape," he said. "Do you sleep better?" "A little." She glanced toward the canal. "The step near my landing is loose. They will fix it now, I think." "They will," he paused. "You heard something that night." "A complaint travels under doors," she said. "I heard Monsieur Boulin ask if a house was an inn or a cave. I heard Monsieur Bardot say the city is not obliged to enter by our windows. Then something like furniture persuaded the wrong way. Afterward, water. 'Thank you,' he said. Back at the quay, Lognon stood in the doorway. 'You've saved me a melancholy,' he said. 'We spared you nothing,' Maigret said. 'You still have your week.' He handed him the statement. 'There'll be no parade.' 'I don't mind parades I don't have to march in,' Lognon replied. 'Men like Boulin are rare and common. They believe world and suitcase should match.' 'Until Astaire disagrees,' Maigret said. In the afternoon, Clairette returned with an envelope stamped Chartres. She set it on his desk without opening it. 'From his sister,' she said. 'I wrote what I could. She writes that she will take the trunk when the law allows, and that I am to keep the waistcoat.' He pushed the envelope back. 'It is yours to open.' She did. The sister asked about the medal and said Armand had always been careless about railings, even as a boy, but careful about other people's mistakes. 'That is true,' Clairette said. 'He carried rules the way other men carry umbrellas. Did you expect to marry him?' Maigret asked. 'I expected to continue,' she said. 'Marriage, perhaps. Or the same café on Thursdays.' She folded the letter. 'I will take the shirts today. Padam will not want to see me, but I will go while the carpenter is there.' 'Go,' he said. 'He will steady the air.' She left. A leaf let go outside. He stopped at l'Encredor. The carpenter had left shavings along the steps. The banister, sanded to honesty, waited for stain. The patron stood watching it as if it might choose a character. She held the saint's medal in her palm. 'He must have lost it the first night,' she said, offering it. 'If the sister asks, you can say it came home by itself.' He examined the dent. 'Did he tap it here?' 'He tapped everything,' she said. 'It was his way of placing himself.' 'And you?' he asked. 'I place myself with a cloth,' she said. 'It did not work this time.' 'It never truly does,' he said gently. At home the casserole tasted better warmed over. Madame Maigret made a small noise at the news of the medal. 'I lost a brooch once,' she said. 'I found it 3 days later in an apron pocket. Things return when they can bear us again.' He kissed her temple. Rain considered the windows and decided against it. Next morning he went to the station to see Clairette off. She had a small suitcase and a larger determination. She carried the waistcoat, the shirts, and the parsley, wrapped now in clean paper. 'Take the local,' he said. 'It will let you arrive at the right speed.' 'I know,' she said. He would have told the driver to take it slower. 'I will sit and think nothing.' 'Sometimes,' he said. 'When it rains properly.' She laughed once and composed herself. The train accepted her with a sigh. He watched until the letters on the carriage were only the idea of letters. On the platform a man with a newspaper said, 'Terrible business at the inn.' He showed a headline that called the staircase treacherous and the curtains sombre. 'Curtains are only cloth,' Maigret said. He walked back through a Paris that had decided to be ordinary. Near the canal he paused. The tobacconist raised a finger. 'For you,' the man said, handing over a parcel wrapped in brown. Inside lay the laundry's receipt stamped collected, the ink still damp. 'Madame left it,' the tobacconist explained. 'She said the house should not owe itself anything.' He tucked it in his pocket and stood with the smell of damp tobacco and drying wood. The inn's curtains were half open. Light made squares on the floor that had not seen squares in years. A woman with a bucket crossed and did not hurry. Some truths arrived softly, like towels drying on a line no one notices until the rain. The city breathed. He put his hands in his coat and let the day carry him step by step toward evening. By late afternoon, the city remembered its chores. The canal carried bits of straw and a flat bottle cap. Maigret let himself be drawn along the pavements until habit brought him again to l'Ancre d'Or. The carpenter's shavings had been swept into a neat heap beside the step. A sign in careful schoolroom letters announced, "Open tomorrow at noon." Inside, the air had learned a new word. Not freshness, that needs sun, but permission. The patronne, without her apron, studied the staircase as if it were an acquaintance who had finally introduced himself honestly. Bardot was not there. A municipal seal on yellow paper hung from the cellar door. "You will open?" Maigret asked. "If they let us." She lifted a shoulder and let it fall. "We will serve fewer rooms. We will not promise the stairs more than they can keep. And the curtains." She glanced at them. One hung an inch shorter where a hem had let go. "We will see," she said. "Perhaps mornings they stay shut. Afternoons they try courage." On the pavement the tobacconist spread yesterday's news to dry. "Urine breathes again," the man said. "Breathing is a beginning," Maigret replied. At the quay a note waited from the magistrate, asking whether accident would be allowed to remain accident. Maigret wrote back, "Yes, with the additions of delay and fear, and the arithmetic that adds secrecy to misfortune in the hope of subtraction. A policeman's pen should not believe itself a trumpet." Madame Maigret had onions softening in a pot, and a page of market accounts that had forgiven 2 small errors. She welcomed him kindly. They ate simply. When he said the inn would open again, she approved with a hum that meant yes, but careful. "The woman?" she asked. "Clairette is on a train with parsley and a waistcoat," he said. "Good," she said. People tire when words pretend to wash more than they can. After dinner he smoked by the open window. The evening had the metallic coolness of coins left in shade. He thought of the dented medal and of fingers tapping counters as a way of placing oneself. Boulin had placed himself everywhere and nowhere. A circle on zinc, a complaint on a stair, a sprig of parsley on a kitchen table in Chartres. It would amount to a life once memory did its stitching. He slept, rose early, and went to the river, because some endings are understood best near water. The Seine had taken on a patient green. He watched a rope describe the same arc without boredom, and thought that most crimes are not acts but consequences. At 11 he turned toward the canal. The sign had been flipped. L'Ancre d'Or was open shyly. The curtains were drawn back a palm's width, the measure of cautious hope. Inside sat 2 workmen, a woman with damp hair from a purposeful wash, and a child who drank sugared milk with the solemnity of an oath. The patronne moved with fewer gestures. Bardot counted coins and let a pile remain imperfect. "He used to complain about that," she said when she noticed his glance. "He would lick his thumb and make me straight." She half smiled. "Today the pile will be crooked. Leave something for the afternoon," he said. He ordered coffee, and it arrived without apology. On the zinc a fresh bottle of mineral water stood, label untroubled. A ring had already formed beneath it, honest and round. He touched the mark with the back of a finger, and felt a small unreasonable contentment. Clairette came in, smaller from rail travel, carrying an empty paper bag that had once held parsley. She nodded to the room, nodded to him, and took a seat near the window. The patronne brought a cup and, after a second thought, a second sugar. They exchanged a few words in the language of women, whose days will cross often and never entirely touch. Clairette took from her pocket the laundry receipt stamped "collected" and laid it between them like a fact that had done its duty. She went to Chartres at the proper speed, Maigret told the patronne later. "That matters. Speed always matters," she said, glancing at the stairs. "Too quick and you fall. Too slow and you do not arrive." Bardot set the saint's medal near the till, not as a lure but as a reminder. He had polished it, where it did not need polishing. The dent remained. The dent remained. When he had finished his cup, Maigret did not immediately leave. He listened. The inn made sounds it had not made in days. A spoon settling in a glass, a slipper asking permission, a floorboard giving a small opinion and not insisting. He put money on the saucer and left no instruction about the coins. Outside, the canal chose to glitter. The tobacconist slid matches across the counter without being asked. "For Monsieur's pipe," he said, "and for patience." "Both have their days," Maigret said. Work waited. He returned to the quay, signed what needed signing, and scratched through a phrase that smelled of tragedy, replacing it with one that smelled of work. He sent the carpenter a line praising the banister for telling the truth under the hand. He let the hours be hours, not an argument. Toward evening he walked once more by the inn. The curtains, confident now, admitted light, as if charging an entrance fee. He stood a moment longer than a passerby must, and then moved on, not because anything remained to be done, but because everything had already been done that could be, and cities, like stories, prefer a quiet exit. On the corner he stepped into a cafe that knew him. He thought of a man with a cheap medal, and of an inn where water had been asked to carry more than water can carry. He thought of Clairette threading her needle a little slower, of Bardot learning the weight of rope as memory rather than use, of a patron discovering that curtains can open more than windows. He finished the glass and sat without hurry, listening to Paris practicing the trick it knows better than any place, making room for lives that do not fit perfectly. Rain threatened, then reconsidered. He did not light his pipe. It was enough to breathe, to taste the last iron of the day, and to feel the reliable heaviness of the coat on his shoulders. When he finally stood, night began to draw itself carefully along the street, like a curtain closed by someone who now, at last, understood the room, gently. So, the following days unfolded in their ordinary rhythm, the kind of rhythm that hides what has already been decided. The inn reopened with fewer rooms, fewer promises, but more air. The carpenter's stain had dried. The banister held firm underhand. The curtains learned to breathe. Bardot and his wife moved with the weariness of people who had spoken all their words at once, and now had none left except for the price of bread and the time of trains. They would carry the accident longer than any punishment could oblige them to. Clairette returned once more, not to linger but to collect what had been promised: the shirts, the waistcoat now mended, the medal polished until the dent shone clearer. She said little, but her eyes searched the rooms, not for Boulin but for the echo he had left. A circle of water on zinc, a complaint about curtains, the memory of a hat crooked on the peg. Then she departed quietly with the bundle under her arm, her footsteps sure, as though she knew the path of her own life at last. The magistrate wrote his report, spare and exact. Accident, concealment, delay, fear. Not malice, not cruelty. The papers condensed it into 3 columns, then let it fade under fresh scandals. The tobacconist nodded when Maigret passed, as if to say that some things were better folded away than displayed. And the canal, indifferent, went on carrying its bottle caps and straw, its reflections of a city too large to pause. Maigret himself had no need for grand statements. He had seen once again how ordinary people break under the weight of small misfortunes, how silence and secrecy transform a stumble into a crime. He had watched fear become heavier than the body they tried to hide. There had been no murderers in this case, only 2 innkeepers who chose badly in the night, and a traveller whose habits outlived him in scraps of cloth and careful complaints. One evening, at home, he told Madame Maigret the last of it over stew. She listened without interruption, hands folded, the small lamp catching the gold thread of her hair. When he finished, she said only, "It was the curtains. They held their breath too long." "Yes," he agreed. "Curtains and stairs and water." He tapped the ashes from his pipe. The rest was people. Outside, rain began again, soft as if it did not wish to intrude. He stood at the window for a while, watching the wet lamps blur and sharpen, blur and sharpen. It was enough to know the inn would go on, quieter but truer, that Clairette would sew her seams in peace, and that Paris, with all its secrets and sorrows, would keep breathing in the same tired, forgiving way. And so the case of the inn with curtains always closed slipped back into the fabric of the city, not with an arrest to trumpet, nor a revelation to astonish, but with the quiet settling of truth, like dust that has finally chosen where to lie. Maigret lit his pipe, drew once and let the silence answer for him.